Hello there. Welcome to this edition of Deb Talks. Today I have some amazing guests here with me. This is Tonya Burg and John Burg. They are a real estate agent team over in Gooding with Keller Williams. And I've invited them in today so that we can talk about um, prepping a seller, not only to list their house, some things that they can watch for, maybe some ideas on getting the home show ready, and then what you guys do when you're prepping a seller. Because, I mean, the market's pretty hot right now. So welcome.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. And just to clarify, I'm a mother and this is son.
yes, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I love the fact when John joined you, how long have you been, 3 years, 4 years?
I got licensed in early 2020 and have been
Okay,
part of
so
the
right at
Burg team
4 years.
pretty much since then.
And you've been doing this
Since
for-
1996. Yes. And
So
yeah.
she doesn't look like it,
Yeah.
does she? Yes,
Yes.
this is the
Thank you.
face of the Burg team.
Thank you, Deb.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of the things we do when we meet with sellers is we have what's called a listing presentation, and it's a document that we give to the sellers that just kind of outlays the things that they should look for. It talks about inspections, appraisals, and the first thing we do with sellers is that we walk around the interior of the home as well as the outside,
Okay,
and paying attention to chipped and peeling paint regarding to loans and those types of things. And usually our take is always, we try to not have the seller be put out by potential repairs in the get.
but just to give them some ideas of what potentially could be coming down the pike, just to put that in the mindset
Correct.
to start with.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. And those are things, and we talk about when we list a home, we will do professional
Okay.
photography.
oh, good,
Um,
okay,
So we hire a photographer and they'll do aerial shots as well as the interior shots. And those photos are typically always what gets buyers into the home.
because that's the first thing that goes on, that's what you guys put on social media, on obviously the listing in the MLS.
Correct.
Right, so
Yeah.
that's what people look at, obviously, very first.
Yeah.
So that's important that those look sharp.
Sharp, exactly. Another thing that we go over a mock potential net sheet with the seller to kind
Okay.
of give them an idea of
And what is the net sheet, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah.
So people
You
understand,
wanna-
yeah,
A net sheet is pretty much, it goes over the scenario of a purchase price and then what a seller would net at the end of all of the fees that they're going to pay out. So it'll
Okay.
have the owner's title policy, the escrow fee, any commissions that are in the transaction that the seller's agreed to pay, and then it'll include their loan payoff and any other fees or costs like any repairs that they've had to do. And then at the end of that, it'll show all of the estimated costs for the sale and then the estimated proceeds for what the seller will net at the end.
okay, that's great information, so you do sit down with that seller and you do show them potentially what amount they're gonna have when they're done selling their home in their pocket.
Yeah.
That's really what a net sheet does for them.
Mhm.
And I love the fact that you guys do that, and that you clearly show what all the fees are, the breakout of the fees, because it's not as black and white as it would appear. Title fees, all those things that you're talking about.
It certainly helps when a seller knows what they're going to expect, and then certainly when we go to help them buy another home, and they know what to expect as a down payment for that, and then that goes into your side of the loan and all
Right.
those aspects.
Okay, that's great. Net sheet's very important then.
We also will recommend to the sellers to interview other agents because not all
Okay.
agents are the same.
Right.
Like I said, we do professional photos and I believe that there are other agents that don't do professional photos. So those are some added values for John and I as far as the Burg team goes. We will go over the repairs, there's a list of contractors that we have in our listing packet.
Okay,
So that sellers have, if there's paint that needs to be done, if there's a plumbing issue, if there's electrical, we have a list of local.
so you put that in the package for them to start with in case it's needed during either the home inspection piece, and we can kind of touch bases on what you guys do with that, and or the loan piece. So they have easy access to somebody that can help them through that piece of it.
Correct.
Okay.
And there's a few contractors per trade on our
Okay.
list that we have, so it's
Okay.
not just one, but yeah.
That's good information too.
Yeah.
For a seller to
we
have.
like from. And the other thing we kind of do is we go over the process of from listing to offer to appraisal and inspection and then to particularly closing the end of the sale. So we will explain to them that when we get a buyer under contract, there's some negotiations that happen.
Okay.
And then once those negotiations are completed, then the buyer typically will hire an inspector, and that inspector goes through, and we tell the sellers that at the inspection time, they might come back to us with a list of 15 items. And for John and I, with regards to sellers, we usually only like our sellers to do non-cosmetic things. So
Okay.
so things like leaking faucets, outlets that don't
The
work.
bones and structure of the house,
Correct.
the
Yeah.
important
Yeah.
thing.
Correct.
Smoke
Right.
alarms,
Yeah,
things like that.
safety
that are safety
items.
items.
Yeah.
Okay,
And the other thing so the inspection happens, and that list of items that comes back to us that a buyer would want done, we will either, the seller can accept all of those items and move forward, or the seller can negotiate, and we would go back and forth with the buyer with regards
but you're
to
there
the
with the
items.
seller, walking the seller through these kind of items.
Absolutely.
And explaining from your professional view what really truly might be needed or what is more of a
Yeah.
want instead of a
Cosmetic.
need on the house.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, because that can be overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Those inspection reports can be very
Yes,
overwhelming.
Yes, and not all inspectors are the same either,
Right.
so
Right,
that is something to know. And that's the other thing is when we do have buyers, I know we're talking about sellers right now. but
Correct,
We
yeah.
have a list of inspectors that we give to our buyers so that they have a
Okay.
choice of who they want to use as well. So we get through the inspection process, and then provided the buyer's getting a loan, then the appraiser is sent out, and if there are items on the appraisal, typically the seller is usually when a contract is accepted, I'm kind of backing up a little
yeah,
bit.
that's okay, yeah.
In the contract, there's an area where the seller is required to pay up to a certain amount of dollars for lender required repairs.
Okay.
And we will have that on the net sheet that we mentioned that says this is the max that you are on the hook for regarding lender required repairs.
So you're protecting your seller right there by making sure that contract is correctly written.
Yes,
Fees are put in there what they can max expect.
correct.
Okay,
Yes, yeah. And we've already kind of gone through the home, kind of knowing what to expect as far as any appraiser required repairs.
There might be some chipped and peeling paint on the outside of the home or a missing handrail. That's a common one that we always see going downstairs, is that somebody doesn't have a handrail.
and those are lender required repairs, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that's all safety issues,
Mhm.
believe it or not, so, okay,
And then once the appraiser comes out and we get through that, usually within a week or two, we'll close escrow. And close escrow is we meet with the seller at the title company,
okay,
and we will have already reviewed the closing statement, which is very similar to the net sheet that we talked about, only this is an official document now from the title company. And they've gotten the payoff from the loan.
so these are hard figures that we know you're gonna close with, and at the very bottom then on that settlement statement is going to show that seller exactly to the penny,
Correct.
to the penny,
Yeah, yeah,
what they're going to get from the proceeds of their home.
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
you guys make it sound really easy. It's probably because you've been doing it a while, right? But I mean, you follow the same steps. You've got your systematic approach, which is important, and you're following those steps.
Right.
So,
We have checkoff lists of, these are the things we do at listing. These are the things we do at inspection. These are the things that we do at appraisal, following up with the seller and communicating with the seller and or the buyer's agent are instrumental in helping a deal
Go
move
through.
forward
right.
accurately and easily.
Okay. Now I'm going to throw one out there. Okay. And this is okay. So what kind of advice, and I know that's hard to say just because, hey, I mean, we don't have a home in front of us, but are there some generic advice or information that you could give a seller to make it sell ready, show ready? I mean, I don't even know if I'm wording that the correct way, but is there some things there like maybe the curb appeal thing, or do you guys go through that with the seller too?
We try to. It's always hit or miss. Some sellers want to upgrade their property and make it as attractive as possible, and some other sellers are, let's just get it sold and not invest any more money into it. But
And I can understand both sides of that.
yeah, and
Right.
we're always looking at the curb appeal, mainly the first thing that you're looking at when you see the home. Because if a buyer sees it online, they see the first picture, and if that looks good enough, then they'll start swiping and they'll see the next 40 pictures.
Okay.
But if the front of the home is just maybe a yellow color, maybe a certain color, not attractive, they're just going to go on to the next home. And so
So that is important.
we like the curb appeal, and that goes back to photography.
And I like how you said that though. I liked how you explained that. It's like if that first look at is appealing, more than likely they're going to go through.
Mhm.
If not, so that explains everything, how important it is. I mean, you mentioned the color yellow. And a lot of times you really can't do a lot about the color of the home, but I mean, like mowed grass,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
grass, all of
Weeds
those.
pulled. Yeah. There's
Just trimmed bushes and flowers. If you can have a cute home that has a little bit of color, a little bit of pop to the front door, maybe it's a red door on gray siding.
right.
Just a
Ooh,
little
I love
bit
red
of
doors. I love red doors. What country is it that says if you have a red door, you've paid off your home? There's a country
I've never heard of that.
over in Europe somewhere, and I'll have to find that information out. But anyhow, sorry.
fun fact, right?
Yeah, there we go. Fun fact right there. You should have saved that for the very end.
Fun to follow fact.
Yeah, fun to follow that. I'm gonna have to Google what that is. But that is obviously very, very important to have that first initial look at the house
Mhm.
be appealing to the eye.
Some buyers, they see that front photo and maybe it's a little bit ugly or unattractive, and they know, hey, I can put flowers there, I can do these things, and I can overcome that issue that they see. And then other buyers, they'll see it and they'll just swipe. They'll go on to the next home that fits their criteria and meets all of those boxes.
Okay.
And
What about the inside of the house? Do you give advice on? And that one's a little harder. I mean, let's be honest, that one's a little touchier. I get that because that's somebody's home.
Yes.
And that's their choice on what things look like inside. I totally understand that. And I think that's important that they feel at home in their own home.
mhm.
But I mean, is that something that you guys talk about?
Yeah, so we advise sellers to declutter. And kind of right away when you walk into the home, if there's an odor of any type, whether they have pets or anything, those are things that we would absolutely recommend a seller to put some air fresheners out, or maybe they air out the home before we have showings.
And not to cover something up,
No.
right? Because when they move out, the new owners will make it their own personal space too, and those things will just but to just showcase.
Sometimes first impressions are either they're black and white, and so
Just like showing the front picture of the house, same thing when you walk in.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah. So and decluttering, packing away their personal photos.
I've heard that.
Well, and the buyers want to, a majority of them want to be able to picture themselves in the home. Where sometimes when there are personal photos on the walls, It's just kind of distracting, and then, people are starting to think about the family that live here, and maybe they don't want to offend the family, or maybe they know somebody that's in the family, and
Okay.
so we always recommend removing personal photos from the house, just to kind of remove that emotion that might come with
Would you recommend would you recommend instead of that personal photo, just throwing a quick little canvas up there instead? Something like that,
something generic,
especially, yeah,
absolutely,
okay.
yeah.
So you can still see, what a house might look like
Yeah.
decorated.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's important.
Maybe some artwork or something on the wall, and whether it be, we always see that the whole wall full of family pictures, and that's just
That's my house.
Yeah, it's your
My
house.
yeah.
We've got one in our
I-
house, and I
yes.
mean it's normal. It's every
Right.
family should have that wall. But when you're going
Right.
to sell a home, you're selling the home, and you're selling a house, not the home.
Right,
And
okay,
so you've got to get rid of some emotion and pull off a couple of those pictures. It's probably okay to leave, one or two still on the wall if you want that memory, Debbie, of your family there.
I do,
And-
because I don't remember them any other way.
But you can leave a couple of photos on there. We just don't want it to be distracting. You
Overwhelming.
Okay.
want the house to be showcased and not your personal belongings.
That is great advice. I never looked at it that way before on the why behind that, but that's
Mhm.
great advice, I like that.
And then we talk about like staging, so moving furniture around, making spaces to seem like they're bigger than what they are.
Well, showcase the
Yeah.
space that's there.
Correct.
I mean, because I know
Yeah.
also, and I don't mean to take it to my personal level again, but I know also I'll put furniture in a different spot that maybe if I did it differently, it would open it up. In fact, not to tell on somebody, okay, I can't tell on somebody, they like to angle their furniture because it opens that up. I can't stand that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I can't stand that
It
at all.
takes a lot of room when you angle your furniture too.
Is that the
Yeah,
reason?
but yeah, you're removing
Okay.
a lot of
Alright.
space.
So, and that's just their personal, preference, but that would,
Yeah.
oh, see, I thought it did just the opposite. But just making that showcasing the room.
Mhm.
Okay,
And cleaning, like wiping baseboards and cleaning windows
the fun stuff we like to do.
yeah, right, yeah,
Yeah.
the wonderful things, yeah, that we don't like to do.
Right.
Removing pet, the,
Like dog beds,
yes,
stuff like
dog
that.
beds,
Cat
litter
litter
boxes,
boxes.
yes, those types
Okay.
of things.
A common issue that we see here in Idaho, being a very red state, is we see a lot of guns and weapons left out.
Or
whether
animal
it's
heads.
Animal heads. I've got a different opinion maybe than her on that, but
But it might not be for everybody.
yes.
Right.
And a buyer might see that animal head in a house and they're like, oh, that's scary. Or another hunter might see that and they're like, I want that house,
Right.
because that's a cool head. And so you get both sides
Right.
of that scope. But
But still that goes back to your personal
mhm,
items, whether it's your family photos or something more personal to you, which I get it, it's your home. But at the same time, if you're trying to sell it, you want to showcase the home and not your personal things.
that's not going with
Okay.
the house. If it's going with the house, then great.
Sure.
We're gonna showcase that and it's part of it. But most of the time it's not.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. What about the back? If we're walking through the house, and maybe I'm going too far into this, but what about, like, would you give advice on backyards and stuff like that, what needs to,
I would say that sort of should follow the whole front yard of just getting it trimmed. Your bushes should be hedged and maintained, so that they're just cute and not overgrown or too much work. Sprinklers should be checked if you're in the spring.
Oh,
Sprinklers should
okay.
be checked. Here in Twin and Jerome, we have backflow testing that has to be done.
okay,
So there's just certain rules and laws. They vary around the counties here in the southern Idaho, but
so you're talking to them too, and this, I'm glad you brought that up, because that, I haven't even thought about that. I mean, but depending on where you live, there are those kind of things, so you're talking to the seller, was this done,
Correct.
those kind of things.
you're following up on the maintenance of, if you live in town, you should have backflow testing, but if you're in the country, you wouldn't have that. You're
Okay.
just on a well and septic, and so Just varying things to make sure
And if
that
somebody's on well and septic,
when's the last time that it's been pumped? How long has it been checked?
the
and
water
all of those
testing, those
things.
kind of things,
Mhm.
okay. And do you just talk about that to them to start with, or do you wait till a loan type comes involved with that?
We'll ask those questions up front, but we aren't gonna do any testing or pumping until we get a buyer under contract and
See what the
then,
buyer wants.
that'll be spelled out in the contract.
Okay,
And part of the listing is there is a 5-page disclosure that is called the property disclosure, or RE 25. And that is a disclosure that we give to the seller, and they answer questions about plumbing and if they've ever filed a homeowner's insurance claim,
okay,
if they have sprinklers, if they have been tested, and then the well and septic is also in that property disclosure. When was the last time they had it pumped and inspected? When was the last time they checked their well? And part of the purchase process is there's a water test that's done on the water to test for E. coli, coliform, and sometimes nitrates and nitrites, depending on the loan type too. So
okay,
those are things that are in the property disclosure. It outlays whether there's a shared road, whether there's a shared well. There's like I said, it's a 5-page disclosure that the sellers have to fill out if their dishwasher's working, if they have a disposal, those types of
Okay.
things. Yeah.
so the seller fills that out with your guys' listing package and then the buyer can see
And that's something that the buyer also acknowledges and signs too.
that, that this is what the seller said is working.
Here's what's working,
Okay.
here's what's not, and
Okay.
any other disclosures that a person's required to know about, like, if the seller had easements, that may be on that type of document.
Okay,
Or anything that they want to disclose themselves, that's what that document's for.
so they're really, and I know this, but a lot of people don't realize how much does go into even getting your house ready to list.
Yeah.
But those are the things that you guys will sit down with on every seller
Correct.
and go through that in that, you call it a listing package?
Listing package, correct, listing packet. And
Okay.
so before we come up with a price, so to determine a price for a seller, we do something called a CMA, comparable market analysis, that we have gone through the particular city, neighborhood that the home is in, and we will pull some active listings that are currently listed, some pending listings that are currently pending, and then some sold listings within the last 3 to 6 months. And that is how we come up with an actual list price for the
The
seller.
value of the
The
home.
value of the home, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And obviously it's up to the seller still, because I know
Mhm.
ultimately, do I want to, is this the price I really want?
Correct.
But what you're showing them is the data that would support, this is what your house would sell for,
Correct.
which is important because if it is overpriced, when the lender gets an appraisal done, that's gonna change if it's overpriced.
Correct.
Because everybody wants I get it, everybody wants, and they should deserve the top dollar for your property. But the reality of it is sometimes the data will show that that's really not what the value is.
Correct.
And so here it is. So you guys do that also. I
Yeah.
mean, okay.
And the
We
reason
suggest
why
A
we do
suggest a price. You
Yes.
suggest a price, you don't,
Yeah.
okay,
Mhm.
okay.
And the reason why we do the CMA of getting 3 recently sold properties in the last 6 months and then 3 active and 3 pendings are because that's what the appraiser is gonna do, is they're gonna go back and get those properties from the last 6 months. And so if we find the most comparable comp, that is comparable to this home for sale that's sold, hey seller, here's what another buyer said that they're willing to pay for a similar home of yours. And so it just gives an idea of, hey, here's where we think we could get a buyer at.
And that's smart. I mean, so you guys do all this work to get the house listed to sell.
Mhm.
And that's very smart the way that's done, because exactly what you said, that's exactly what appraisers do. They still go to the same data stuff and pull that information.
Mhm.
So
So then at the end of this, we know that we aren't gonna be missing value on the appraisal, so that if we get an appraisal back, we've had that happen where we're just short 20,000 in price. You know, we may be under contract for 400 and the appraiser said the property was worth 380. And so now we have this issue, and that's why
That
we
bridge
like
gap.
that's why we like to show the seller, here's what similar properties have sold for, so they don't get ahead of themselves and accept
Right,
something
and that's
too
smart.
much.
Again, that's smart the way you do it that way, because you tell them, I'm assuming, obviously, this is the data the appraiser's gonna pull also.
Mhm.
Correct. And we have had a few situations where we've done the market analysis, the CMA, and we've priced out the home accordingly. And when the appraisal came in, it was lower than what we were under contract for, what we even had it listed for. And that market analysis, the CMA, is our proof, and we've been able to send those numbers
The
to the
data.
appraiser, the data, yeah, and have, knock on wood, gotten the few deals that
Right.
we've had that didn't come in at value, that the appraiser reviewed those things and went ahead and gave us the value that we were under contract for. So.
So you guys are just the brainiacs all together. I mean, you are, right? I mean,
Well, we do everything we can for our
everything.
sellers, yeah, and,
Right.
and the marketing, I mean, we didn't even touch on marketing of once we have the home listed, there's social media, there's ads, there's just the marketing piece of it is a full-time job in itself,
right,
just
to
getting it.
get that home out there so somebody comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Did we miss on anything? You think of it?
I don't know, inspection, yeah,
You guys did a great job of explaining that.
thank you for having us.
Oh, absolutely. So that is some great information for sellers to know. And if you have questions, you guys can reach out to John or Tonya and they can help answer any other questions you might have.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us, Deb.
You bet.